Welcome to Jerusalem, one of the most frequently destroyed and rebuilt cities in the entire world. So let's check out some videos on Jerusalem and see what kind of... It's not good. Okay, this is a bunch of Christians having a massive throwdown.
He hit me like this. They broke the lens of my glasses.
But surely there must be a reason for them to be fighting next to the Tomb of Jesus. Like the actual Tomb of Jesus. Like Elvis doing a karate demonstration, it's one of those things that seems made up, but actually happened. Now, I'm sure you'd like to know what caused this colossal tussle, why it's next to a tomb inside of a weird mutant church, and what it has to do with a little wooden ladder that hasn't moved in about 300 years. So is this the real Tomb of Jesus? Or is it this one? Or was there actually a dude named Jesus at all? And what's it all got to do with a Roman emperor who sent his mom to go run some errands for him?
And I had this scratch.
But if we want to know why this guy had his glasses broken, we're gonna have to go back. Okay, not that far. Ah, there we go. Ancient Rome in the year 312 AD. At a battle which would determine the future of the entire planet. Am I overselling that? Yeah, you'll just have to watch and see. Now, the Roman Empire had been split into two pieces, ruled by two groups of senior and junior rulers in a system called the Tetrarchy. Which kind of sounds like the name of a moderately popular metal band. So a man named Constantius ruled the western part of the empire, including Rome itself. When Constantius kicked the bucket, some people thought a guy named Maxentius should take over. Others thought the job should go to Constantius' son, a guy you might have heard of. You've probably already guessed his name because of the lack of originality. It was Constantine. You know where this is headed, right? No, the two didn't hug and decide to share power. There's a reason you've heard of Constantine, and Maxentius is probably best known for being confused with Russell Crowe.
I will have my vengeance. In this life or the next.
Hey, Jesus.
I know you're about to start talking about me. You're gonna be respectful, right?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I'm gonna try to make the story sound interesting, but I was hoping
Just be respectful.
I will. Look, can you just tell me if any of this actually happened? The big showdown between Constantine and Maxentius took place on a bridge over the Tiber River in Rome. For an account, let's look to Constantine's biggest fan and #1 hype man, an early Christian bishop named Eusebius. Here he is in his own words, talking about Constantine before the battle.
And while he was thus praying with fervent entreaty, a most marvelous sign appeared to him from heaven, the account of which it might have been hard to believe had it been related by any other person.
So this gets back to the old question of how much we can trust ancient historians. Eusebius' words throughout his book, Life of Constantine the Great, are dripping with praise. As far as he's concerned, the guy, well, he walks on water. And at the same time, he talks about Maxentius as a tyrant who practiced wicked and magical enchantments. He continues by describing what Constantine supposedly said.
About noon, when the day was already beginning to decline, he saw with his own eyes the trophy of a cross of light in the heavens, above the sun and bearing the inscription, "Conquer by this." At the sight, he himself was struck with amazement, and his whole army also, which followed him on this expedition and witnessed the miracle.
Eusebius goes on to say that Constantine didn't quite know what to make of this apparition until Jesus came to him in a dream that night and said, "Dude, you're the man. God and I have got your back. Just take that sign, put it on some stuff, and take it into battle." This sign is known as the Chi Rho, an X intersected with a P, forming the first two letters of Christos in Greek. He slapped that symbol on his army's shields, and they went to war. The end result? Maxentius was defeated, obviously. The end result of that? In true Christian manner, Constantine forgave Maxentius, who lived the rest of his life in comfort, becoming a trusted advisor of the new emperor. Just kidding. He drowned in the Tiber, his body was fished out, then the head was sent to North Africa so it could tell everyone who the man was. The man was Constantine. He took over the rest of the Roman Empire, legalized Christianity, and the world was forever changed. See? I told you that battle would determine the future of the planet. Constantine wasn't the only member of his family who's remembered today. So was his mom, Helena, or Saint Helena to some. I suppose you could call her Helena too, but, well, let's stay on track here. Constantine liked to have his mom wait on him. And I don't just mean with serving up some Hot Pockets and Sunny D. You see, Constantine sent his mom to go run some errands for him. Like some really important errands on a propaganda trip out east. Namely, he sent her to Jerusalem to find Jesus stuff. Yeah, there's probably a more eloquent way of saying that, like relics of Christ or something along those lines. Specifically, she was searching for the true cross, the actual crucifix the Romans nailed Jesus to. There's many ancient historians who say she found it, and there's a multitude of churches around the world who claim to have a piece of it. This from the Protestant theologian John Calvin in the 1500s.
There is no abbey so poor as to not have a specimen. In some places there are large fragments. In brief, if all the pieces that could be found were collected together, they would make a big shipload. Yet the gospel testifies that a single man was able to carry it.
So he's a bit of a doubting Thomas. After all, having cool Jesus stuff like the crib of Jesus or the blood of Jesus was a must if you were going to get people to come to your church. But if we're to believe what ancient writers said, Helena did find the true cross. And she also found what's now contained in the church we're talking about, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The church, put simply, holds what many believe to be the site of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Here's a video I probably took while walking to that church at around 6 in the morning, because surely there wouldn't be a line at the tomb of Jesus that early. Now, let's just look at things in a purely historical context here. There was a guy named Jesus. He lived in the 1st century, went around and taught things about peace and love, hung out with the poor and the outcasts, gained followers, and was eventually crucified. The crucifixion, as well as the fact that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, are agreed upon by most historians. They call it the criterion of embarrassment, meaning that early Christians wouldn't have made up things that made Jesus look like a loser. Being baptized by someone else makes him look like a loser. Being crucified really makes him look like a loser, since it was something reserved for people who were especially bad. Hey, Jesus.
I hope you're not saying I'm a loser.
No, I'm just explaining why the academic types think you're real.
Oh, okay, good. You know, you can't be too careful these days. Just make sure you tell everyone about the whole loving your neighbor thing, okay?
Yeah, actually, I just mentioned some of that. It's definitely kind of important.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. You know what? You can even tell people I said they should like and subscribe.
Oh, thanks, Jesus. Now, back in the year 70, about 40 years or so after the crucifixion, Rome sacked Jerusalem and took over the whole area. By the time the 300s rolled around, Helena was supposedly taken by locals to the site of the crucifixion and resurrection, now beneath a Roman temple built by the Emperor Hadrian. Let's go back to our good buddy, the slightly trustworthy Eusebius.
Above the ground, they constructed a terrible and truly genuine tomb, one for souls, for dead idols, and built a gloomy sanctuary to the impure demon of Venus. Then they offered foul sacrifices there upon defiled and polluted altars. They reckoned there was one way alone and no other to bring their desires to realization, and that was to bury the Savior's cave under such foul pollutions.
Eusebius credits someone else with discovering this location, but according to others, this is where Helena found the true cross and the tomb of Jesus. Constantine later had a church built on the site. Now, the obvious question is whether or not the spot inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is actually where Jesus was crucified and buried. According to the Bible and other sources, Joseph of Arimathea, a rich dude who was one of Jesus' followers, got permission from the Roman governor Pontius Pilate to take the body of Jesus. He buried it in his own family tomb, which was pretty nice of him if you ask me. And sure enough, there are a number of tombs in the back corners of the church. In the time of Jesus, this was outside the city walls, which is where burials took place. Now, I do want to point out that there's other supposed Jesus tombs, like this one in Jerusalem called the Garden Tomb. And it's also a space where you should probably focus on watching your head and not on shooting video.
I'm alright.
No, I wasn't alright, I just said that it was kind of embarrassing. As for what historians say, it's almost certainly not the actual tomb, but it's still worth checking out. Just, watch your head. As we walk inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to see if 6 a.m. was early enough to avoid the line, the topic of where's the real tomb of Jesus is one for another day. But for the purposes of this tale, let's just say we can be reasonably sure that the current church is on the same site as the one established by Helena and Constantine. And no, I wasn't early enough. You'd think going to Catholic school would get me some sort of fast pass or... Okay. Let's just look around this place and come back to the tomb later. And this really doesn't look like a church. Or I guess you could say it looks like a bunch of different churches all crammed together. It's a little hard to describe in words. It overwhelms the senses with this jumbled mishmash of different architecture, mosaics, and decorations. So it's kind of a mutant church. Some might call it beautiful in its chaos. Now, I'm not one of those some, but some would. I don't know them, but I assume they exist somewhere. The reason for this patchwork decor? Well, it's a building that's been built and rebuilt and renovated and restored and cobbled together over the centuries. I mean, look at this floor plan. I'm not even sure what to compare it to, except maybe a maze on a paper placemat for kids at Denny's. There's an area upstairs that's supposedly Golgotha, the rock where Jesus was crucified. Parts of it are covered with glass so you can get a glimpse. And there's a little hole under the altar where you can lean in and touch it. Down below, there's what's called the Stone of Anointing, supposedly where Joseph of Arimathea and others prepared Jesus' body for burial. Though the stone itself isn't actually that old, and even most Christians will agree it's not the actual stone. And here, the main event, what's called the Edicule, a structure over the tomb of Jesus. If you're thinking that line looks really long, you're right. And if you're thinking that doesn't look like a tomb, you're also right. Here's a cross-section that might give you a better idea of what this place once looked like. Over here is Golgotha, and you can see where the top part of the tomb was cleared away to build the church. Now, you aren't supposed to take pictures inside, or that's what I was told by other people in line anyway. I did take this one through a little peephole, but yeah, you can't see anything. So let's look to pictures others have taken. Not too long ago, they were doing restoration work on the tomb and did find a marble slab dated to the time of Constantine and Helena. It's underneath this thing. Whether or not that's proof of anything is up to you. But regardless of what you believe, I think we can all agree this church looks bizarre. Or inconsistent, anyway. That's because it doesn't belong to one group. It's not a Catholic church, it's not a Greek Orthodox church, it's a Christian church? I don't know what to call it. No one does. Much of the structure we see today dates to the time of the Crusaders. They left their graffiti everywhere. And let me tell you, the Crusaders were absolutely wild about this place. Well, wild about this place and also about stealing and murdering and stuff. But that's another story. For now, let's just say that this church was the endpoint of any successful crusade. Of course, Jerusalem itself got passed around over the centuries like a hot potato. Except that would imply it's something people didn't want, so I guess it was an incredibly desirable baked potato with extra sour cream that was in really high demand. Who owns the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has always been a bit of a struggle. After a Franciscan renovation in 1555, control would swing back and forth between the Catholic Franciscans and the Greek Orthodox Church, just depending on who was doing a better job of sucking up to the Ottoman leaders who controlled Jerusalem. Heads were eventually butted, and in the year 1757, the Ottoman Sultan wound up issuing a decree. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, along with other Christian sites in the area, would be split. It's what's called the Status Quo Agreement. Kind of like that creepy old Bible story about King Solomon and the baby, except less violent, I guess. So there's three main groups who control different parts of the building: the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, and the Armenian Apostolic Church.
But I'm not done yet!
Later, other groups got smaller parts: the Syriac Orthodox Church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The doors themselves are controlled by an old Muslim family who's had that responsibility dating back to the 1100s. So there's been some rather notable, let's just call them disagreements. In 1901, there was an argument over a step. The Greek Orthodox Church was responsible for the steps, but the Catholics are responsible for the courtyard. When they tried to sweep the bottom step, supposedly Greek Orthodox monks attacked and 18 people went to the hospital. The step in question is this one. And in fairness, it is pretty short, probably because it's been worn down. Is it a step? Is it not a step? I don't know, but eventually there was an agreement that both groups could sweep it. In the summer of 2002, a Coptic monk was sitting in a chair up on the roof. He moved it so he could sit in the shade, and there was a fight with the Ethiopians. That spot was here, what's called the Monastery of the Sultan. The Ethiopians said that this is their only spot in the entire complex, and a Coptic monk sitting there meant he was trying to show that Egypt had ownership of it, which, well, the Coptic Church didn't say that's not what he was doing. 11 people went to the hospital after some rocks and chairs got hurled around. And up above that notorious step/not a step is this, what's called the Immovable Ladder. Now, no one knows why it's there. One theory is that the Armenians used to use it so they could pull up food and water and they wouldn't have to pay an entrance fee to the Ottomans. Regardless, it's been there for a really long time. Here's the church in 1486. No ladder. And here in 1728. Ladder. In 1834. Ladder. 1842. Ladder. The 1880s. Ladder. 1890 at a really big party. Ladder. You see, as part of the status quo arrangement, no one's allowed to make any changes to the church unless all the different groups agree, and the immovable ladder has kind of become a symbol for how this church has been divided up. Although the ladder did move in 1997 when a Protestant guy grabbed it to make a statement about how silly he thinks this is. The ladder later went back and a metal grate was installed over the window. I guess they must have agreed to make a change so no one could make a change. And despite the fact that there's a Greek Orthodox ceremony called the Holy Fire, there's no fire exit. There's basically only one way in and one way out because no one can agree on where to put a fire exit. Which brings us here. 2008, an Armenian celebration called the Feast of the Cross, remembering, you guessed it, Helena finding the true cross. The Greeks had a monk inside the edicule.
We have this rite 4 times in the year.
The Armenians said he shouldn't have been there.
Which is against the status quo arrangement.
Now, I'm not saying whose fault this was,
He hit me like this. They broke the lens of my glasses.
even though we can see the actual moment of the infamous glasses smash. Let's play it again in slow motion. It's the same guy who decided to turn the church into a mosh pit. Several people were arrested for the big brawl, but were later released. It doesn't seem like anyone was ever able to figure out who really started it. But lest you think this is all a bunch of sucker punches, the various groups have agreed on one thing. Back in the 1940s, the British, who were in charge of the city at the time, enclosed the edicule in iron girders to hold it together. But by 2016, Israel said it was about to collapse and was getting dangerous. So the groups actually worked together and agreed upon a restoration. Maybe it takes actual threats for people to put aside their squabbles over tiny steps or rickety old ladders and unite. Maybe one day, different religions and different sects will realize they have more in common than they think, and they can accomplish more by cooperating. Or maybe I live in a fantasy world where there's simply no respite from broken glasses.
And I was a little dizzy at the moment.
Maybe I can't tell you if this is the real tomb of Jesus, or if a Roman emperor had a magical dream that helped him win a war. All I can say for sure is that we don't need a phone call from Jesus to say he definitely wouldn't approve.
Look, you don't have to like and subscribe, but if you support me, then you would. And, watch more videos.